So, recently I've been working on this CVC Showcase machine, a very rare machine that takes an obscure type of 1/4 inch video cassette. And it had a faulty capstan motor, which was causing a capstan servo problem. But I can't quite finish it because I've needed a replacement drive belt that goes to that same motor.
Dad, special delivery from Deck Tech.
Oh, ideal. Hopefully we can wrap this up now. And I'm also hoping that we'll have a belt in here which will help us with the Ferguson 3V23, a big VHS machine that I was working on a little while ago, where I wasn't happy with the way the capstan was working, and again I think that might have been a drive belt issue. Right, so I get these from my favourite supplier called Deck Tech. I don't know precisely what belt size I need for this, so I've ordered a range of belts of similar sizes. They're all 5mm flat belts. So we'll get this belt off and choose one from this set. So you can see why I didn't fully reassemble all this, because there's quite a lot involved getting back down to the deck. But I only have 2 wires to remove the deck. And you might also remember that I'd swapped this capstan drive circuit over from a different model of machine, and so I had to make a couple of small modifications to make it work on this model. Right, so we have to split the 2 parts, and that's the reason I hadn't put all the screws back in here. Disconnect some cables. The rest I can probably leave on. So this is the belt. This one is not stretched, but it just looks poor. So I'm going to replace that, and it's a little bit fiddly weaving in here, but there's nothing like as fiddly as changing this drive belt, and I am going to have to do that on another machine, actually the one that I borrowed that board from, later. And that's really awkward because to get it past this pin here involves disconnecting springs and things on the other side of the board, the deck, and feeding the belt under here. During manufacture they probably fitted the belt and then they fitted this assembly, but I don't particularly want to take all this off for fear of putting things out of alignment. Okay, so let's undo some screws here on the top of the capstan and get this belt swapped out. Then this all gets a little bit fiddly here. You sort of have to weave it around. Okay, so that comes off without dismantling. It's just a little bit fiddly. I don't know if you can see the surface of this belt just doesn't look to be in the best condition. So let's choose a replacement. Okay, so according to my Toy Town caliper, it's about 15 centimeters along the belt, so the circumference is about 30 centimeters. 300 millimeters divided by pi, it's about 95 millimeters or so diameter, not allowing for any stretch. So we're looking for around about 95-96 millimeter diameter belt. Let's see what a 94 millimeter looks like. Okay, so just a tiny bit tighter, but above all it's got a much better surface finish. So that should be perfect. That looks absolutely perfect. I can now reassemble the whole machine. I just want to show you the path here for the other drive belt. There's one that's really hard to fit. So it goes around the same capstan motor. It's got another notch on the pulley, which takes this belt going across here, over this, and then back up to here. Other belts are this one and this one, so we have a total of 4 drive belts in here. Okay, before I start doing up too many of these screws, I'd better test that that's working okay. Switched it on, hear the monitor fire up. Rewind. Right, if you get that noise on CVC, Sometimes you just have to hit stop, play a couple of times to get it to fully lace. Very common problem with CVC. But apart from some dropouts, that is working just fine. Good, I can carry on reassembling this, but there is one more thing. If I can find the preset tracking control, when this is in its ident position at the start, it should be in the center tracking point, and it doesn't seem to be. So I'm just going to have a look at the manual for the NTSC version of the portable, which is somewhat different to this, but let's see if it's close enough that it can tell us where the preset tracking control is. Right, I'm going to have to take a bit of a shot at this. The preset tracking control. The schematics for the NTSC really don't line up that well with the PAL version. You know, you'd have thought they were going to be more or less the same, but no. So I think it's VR503, which is this one, but I'm not absolutely certain. So I'm going to be very careful to mark up its position before I adjust it. And if that doesn't set the preset tracking control, then I'm going to put that back and leave it well alone. It just means I always have to use the tracking control out here somewhere rather than just leave it parked. Let's see how we get on. I can't readily show you, but no, I can set the tracking in its position there, but when I go back to the default, it's not right. And adjusting this preset is not adjusting the tracking offset. So no, that was not it. Put it back to where it came from precisely, and we're just going to have to live with the fact that we're always going to have to use the tracking control to get it properly tracked like that. Without the proper service manual for the PAL machine, I just can't do any better than that. Yeah, I suspect the preset tracking control is probably on the board underneath, but I'm not going to start fiddling and just twiddling at random, because otherwise I could really upset the servo circuit that we've finally got working properly. And I don't have the PAL service manual, and it just doesn't line up with the NTSC one. The component IDs are all different. Okay, let's reassemble all this. The one to remember here is this countersunk flat-topped screw goes in here, and that will be going underneath the panel. It's the same true of the portable one as well. So then I have to remove the tracking control, and I can put the panel back on with its screws, and then put the tracking control back. It's a bit of a carry-on, isn't it? Okay, good thing I thought to do this now. You really need to get this panel in before you fit all the screws into the deck, because otherwise you won't be able to reach in to do so. Okay, I'm glad to say, complete with sound, that is now a fully working CVC Showcase. But what about the label? That seems to have taken a bit of a dive. So I'll see if I can find out why that's drooped. I'm guessing it's got hot and the glue has melted. So I'll probably warm it up, I think. That'd be a good idea. Warm it up and either ease it back into place or take it off and re-glue it. Let's see how we get on. I think that's done it. Just warmed it and eased it back into place. Right, to the 3V23 Ferguson. This is one where I'd got it working, but had an intermittent problem with audio warble, which is still a capstan servo problem. it means that the capstan flywheel, instead of rotating smoothly, is shimmering along. And I think it might be the drive belt for that. So first, let's see if the fault is present today. Make it a bit louder. Yes. It's not very pronounced. For a lot of material you wouldn't hear it, but you might well hear it in music. Okay. You forget how slow and non-responsive VHS was in the early days, because it does a full lace and unlace every time you press stop and play. Well, actually, so do some beta machines like the Sandia VTC 5000. Right, so let's go to the capstan belt and see if in our collection here we have a better suited belt size than the one I fitted last time. Okay, so I've swung this board out the way. Here's our capstan motor and flywheel. So access is pretty good, I think. Just need to undo these screws. Oops. The belt that was really awkward, if you remember, was this loading belt. That was quite fiddly to get to, but the capstan belt's easy. Right, and what I remember is the original belt was somewhat wider than this. It's a 5mm belt, and I think that one was a little bit too tight. Let me just try to prove it. So if you look at it there, with a bit of tension on the belt, it's only making it not even halfway to the capstan pulley. So that's just a little bit too much tension. So we want something a little bigger than that one. With my Toy Town measuring device, there's about 130mm in half circumference. So doubling it divided by pi, about 82, something like that. That one is about 82mm diameter. We want something a little bigger than 82. I'm thinking, well, we've got 88 or 91, something in that area. Let's try an 88 initially. So there's nothing wrong with this belt. I just don't think it's the right size for the job. Yes, a bit longer. That feels better. Let's try that. And even if it doesn't get rid of the warble, it's certainly going to load the bearings a good deal less. That feels better. No, that really does actually feel better. Okay, let's put the screws back on and test it. Well, it's done nothing to resolve the capstan warble problem, but we tried. Okay, so we still have this problem with the warble to the sound. That slight shimmer to the sound. And I'm thinking it might actually be the capstan motor, which faces down because a pulley was on the other side. So let's see if I can get to the capstan motor from this side. I think I'll power the machine down at this point. And maybe I can do something. Let's have a look. I don't know to what extent I could get some switch cleaner into here, but possibly in there. It might be where the brushes are mounted. I think it's a brush type motor. Yes, let's give that a whirl. I'll try some deoxit switch cleaner in there. Oh, I don't want switch cleaner pouring onto the tape. Oh dear. Well, I hope that's got into the motor. I'll just leave that running for a while and see if things improve. Something we haven't isolated yet is whether it's an electronic fault or mechanical fault. So if I look at the voltage on the capstan motor and see if that's wavering around, then that would imply an electronic fault. But if that seems to be fairly stable, then it is presumably a mechanical fault or a motor fault. So I've hooked up an oscilloscope to the capstan motor, and we'll look at that during playback. Okay, so I'm going to play the tape and have a look at the signal on that motor. It's presently DC coupled. I'll probably have to make it AC coupled, but let's just have a look. What have I done wrong? Switch it on. I'm across the motor. I'm not looking from ground to either motor terminal. Hopefully, I'm across the motor. And we should see it leap forwards and backwards as I adjust the tracking. Because, of course, you do speed and slow the motor. So you can see that as I turn the tracking down, or that way, it slows momentarily, and turn it that way, and it goes up momentarily. Set it to AC, and now I can increase the sensitivity to, say, 100 millivolts. Right, so let's do that with the tracking again. Goes down and goes up. Okay. So we're seeing something of an oscillation on that, but is that cause or effect? Okay, let's try pushing the tracking down. Oh, it's resetting it, which is quite annoying. Picture search. Looking at that waveform, I'm seeing dips of maybe 100 millivolts every 10 milliseconds. So that would, if that was the cause, be creating a 100 hertz warble? No, it's much slower than that. It sounds to me more like about 10 hertz. So I don't think those downward going dips in the voltage are the cause of the warble, because it's a very different frequency to what we're hearing. Let's switch back to looking at the DC voltage. Well, you give me your opinion. I would say that the warble sound we're getting is much lower frequency than the negative going spikes, if you like, inverted spikes that we're seeing on that motor driver. So I think we'd be barking up the wrong tree if we assume it's an electronic fault just based on the ripple that you can see on the motor driver. But you give me your opinion if you've had experience working on this sort of capstan control electronics. The frequency of the warble sounds like it might even be the same as the head drum rotation speed, and that can be a thing if the head drum has contamination on it and it's snagging the tape every time it rotates, but you would normally get lateral wobble visible on the picture. But maybe not. It could just be that the TV is taking that into its scan and is just adjusting the write out speed of the image on the screen because it's a CRT, so we don't see any lateral wobble. So to that effect, I'm going to just check for any contamination on the head drum, give that a clean. It might even be that there's nothing visible on it, but it might have a slightly sticky patch. So we'll give the head drum a quick clean and see if that makes any difference. Okay, never ever use a cotton bud on a head drum unless you are absolutely certain that you're not going to touch the head tips. Quite a lot came off. All that's from the upper drum, not the lower drum. So all this will have been snagging on the tape. So, well, there's a small possibility that that might have been part of it. Let's try it. The head drum bearings seem to be complaining a little bit now. I don't think that would cause this effect. Hopefully the bearings will quieten down in a minute. I've done something a bit naughty. I've stuck a capacitor of 3300 microfarads across the motor, and it's somewhat smoothed the response that you're seeing on the oscilloscope, but has done nothing to change the warble and the audio. So I do not believe that the response, the waveform that the motor is getting, is the cause of the audio warble. I think it's probably mechanical, and what we were seeing on the oscilloscope was a consequence of the servo trying to stabilize the speed. Because I'm not really seeing those peaks or those dips now at the 10 millisecond divisions that we were seeing earlier. I don't think so, do you? I think that's just a general, what we're seeing there is slow servo control, as you would expect to see. So those tiny little downward going negative pulses, I don't believe they're the cause. But, you know, I'm prepared to listen. Furthermore, of course, you might say, well, this is about what you'd expect from the performance of a lo-fi VHS machine of this vintage, that maybe they're just not that good, and that degree of audio flutter is within the range of what would be expected from this kind of motor and this kind of system of its age. Okay, I'm playing some old music on a test card here, and we've got to be careful with copyright, but I can hear the warble. It's slight, but it's there. So I believe this is out of specification to the way the machine would originally have worked. So our question is, what's the cause? Well, I suspect it's the capstan motor itself creating that shimmer in the sound. And this is not for the same reasons, I believe, as we had a bad capstan motor in the CVC machine. That's got an FG generator, generates pulses back from the motor. This is, I believe, just a DC motor, and the closed loop comes from controlling the tape speed. The exact mechanism I'm not precisely sure, but I think because I put the capacitor across the motor and pretty much ironed out the wobble we saw in the drive to the motor, and yet the sound remained warbling, I think we've more or less ruled out a problem with the servo electronics themselves, and I suspect it is the motor. Whether we can obtain such a motor, I don't know. Whether it matters, I don't know. For a machine of this age, it's not going to get a lot of use. It's kind of a bit of an ornament, and the fact that it plays a tape at all is nice, but I really would like to have got it into full working order, and I'm still looking for the remote control. I often release my videos early to patrons, and one of my patron viewers said, why don't I try making a recording on this and see how it plays back on another machine? Good point, because it helps to isolate some of the control electronics in the capstan servo system. So, and also, if it does warble, it pretty much points to it being a mechanical issue, such as the motor. So, I've set it up with colour bars being generated from a digital time-based corrector, a little signal generator here doing 1 kilohertz. That's the record button. Let's make a recording, and then we'll play back this on a machine downstairs in my studio and capture that, and we can have a look and see if it warbles. Also, what does it sound like when played back on itself? Probably doubly terrible. Oh yeah. So I think we've already answered the question. It's going to warble on the playback of a known good machine as well. Let's try it. Okay, so here is playback of the tape on a known good machine. Well, that went as expected. There's definitely audio warble there. So it does point to it being a mechanical issue, and the capstan motor itself is probably the most likely cause. It's been suggested I should be able to dismantle and clean that motor. Yes, maybe, and if I don't get a replacement motor from somewhere else, then that's something I may have to do. Right, we'll leave it today for this machine, and I'll do plenty more content on other audio and video technology shortly. Bye for now. Okay, better put this thing back together, hadn't we? Something that happened to me when I was working on this, I should mention, it's a bit of a poor design, you know, that if you open this panel too far, this metal bar can touch the circuit board. And I did get into that position, and the effect was it played a picture with no colour. I was lucky I didn't blow anything up. Right, so I'm going to refit all the screws and the feet and everything, put the machine back together and see if maybe one day we can source a motor. Oh, perhaps I should show you the motor in a bit more detail. Let's have a closer look at that. We can see some markings there, counterclockwise I think it says, but really we just need to take the motor out and source a replacement from somewhere. I'll reassemble this machine for now. Oh, let me tell you something else. I took my 1972 Hillman Avenger into a repair shop because it needed some work done on the steering rack and front brakes and some welding which had been marked up by the MOT station as being unsatisfactory in a previous repair. So it's a classic car restoration business who I actually trust will do a decent job. Possibly some of the previous work was done a little bit on the cheap. But they came back, having scraped away some of the underseal, found there were more holes and more rust than they were expecting. So it's all going to cost a bit more than I was hoping for. But you can't blame them, they're doing a decent job.